My man.
Hey, mate. How are you?
How's Dubai?
It's all right. I got myself a hat. I thought you'd like this.
I like the hat. Where did you get that from?
Well, the great thing about sailing is that you get sponsored by expensive Swiss watch brands.
I like it. So you having a good time?
Yeah. Welcome to the PIlote podcast. This week, I'm joined by Cory Smith to talk about oil and gas, travel, innovation, and the multiverse. We had a week off last week because you were in Texas and I was traveling, but now we're back. So how was Texas? What did you find down there?
Texas was amazing. Let me tell you, what an education. I went to what they call the OTC conference, which is the Offshore Technology Conference, which is the largest oil and gas conference in the United States.
Okay.
Apparently they have, I don't want to say they haven't done it. I guess they did it last year. It just wasn't as well attended. But this is the first year back since the pandemic where they went all out. And boy, let me tell you, it was something. It was quite large. Most of the conferences I go to are tech conferences. Yeah. And I've been to some big ones, but I've never been to a conference quite this big before. It was
weird name. Is that because of offshore drilling? Is that why it's called offshore?
Right. It was massive. When I got there, it took me about 90 minutes to just get acclimated to the sensory overload. It's not just the oil companies and all of the companies that service the oil companies, shipbuilders and drilling manufacturers and all of the big
some things that you've never thought about, like private security and divers and
absolutely. And all of the consulting companies like Schlumberger and Baker Hughes and Oil States and ABB, these companies that service the oil companies. It's countries. So there's entire countries that have, and when I say booths, that's kind of an understatement. They've got booths, but they're 25, 30,000 square feet. They got like a bar and a coffee bar.
Right. And they're 2 stories and they got a meeting room upstairs and all that kind of stuff.
Gigantic. And then I was there kind of primarily to do some intelligence gathering, nothing nefarious, just to kind of learn a little bit about it and learn about how they're using technology. And I was surprised, but not surprised to find that the industry is very far behind on the way that they use technology for 2022. So, from our perspective.
So from an engineering point of view, they've got some cool kit to get stuff out of the ground kilometers below the sea. But when it comes to using blockchain or something like that, they've got a way to go.
Yeah. So what I was really interested in is I'm on a kind of a religious journey on data, and I'm not a data guy whatsoever, but I spend a lot of time these days talking about data with companies. We talk about data a lot. I was really interested, and part of the reason I went was to understand how oil companies are using data, how they're ingesting it, harmonizing it, and then presenting it or using it to inform decision making in the oil and gas business. And surprisingly, not very well. They kind of are. So they're saying. A lot of companies are saying and selling solutions where they're using IoT on IoT devices, deep sea or on the rigs to be pulling information from, the operational technology from the drilling devices or from the offshore devices. They're also saying that they're pulling data from business systems and other systems to pull it all together and kind of present it to these companies, whether it be people on the rigs or people back at the home office to make decisions from or use artificial intelligence. But the truth is that's a lot of aspirational talk when you really sit down and talk to these people that will actually talk to you and be honest about it, it's a lot of aspirational talk. They're not really doing a lot of it.
Digging really deep holes and sucking stuff out of the ground.
Right. And really what the truth of it is a lot of the companies, a lot of the big companies are still doing it with manpower and hydraulics. They've got men reading dials and writing things down on paper still.
So that was the question I was going to ask, because I was at a conference today, which we'll get onto in a second, but there was a panel about the cargo and shipping industry, and actually the topic was about sustainability. But one of the things they were talking about in terms of trends for the cargo industry moving forward was using automation to get humans out of harm's way and using automation more. So it's just, I'm guessing that oil and gas are doing a similar thing. If you can have a robot working on the sea floor controlled by an operator on a rig rather than having to send a diver 100 meters down, then surely they'd be doing that kind of stuff.
Lots of robots, Boston Dynamics, all the big robotics manufacturers. There's a lot of robotics. There's a lot of technology, advanced technology being employed on that front. But like on the digital technology, stuff that you and I use every day in commerce, in manufacturing, in just business, stuff that we are light years ahead on. And even the most simple stuff that we do is not being employed in this industry.
What about the prospecting side? Are they still? They must be using data for that kind of thing.
Very limited. It's weird.
Okay.
Like they are using a very advanced technology, like you said, robotics and geology and the science side of it. Just not a lot on the business side of it.
Given the profits that they're making right now, they probably don't.
Well, and when I talk to, and I've talked, me, I'm perennially curious that in the oil business, it's like a feast or famine. So when the business is good, it's really good, and they're just like, whatever the problem is, throw money at it. Like they've got plenty of money and they don't care. Or when things are tight, they reel the money in and they just stop spending money on it. And it's also a very risk-averse business. It's an old business. It's like they're like the financial, this is the way they described it. It's kind of like banking and financial services. Very risk-averse, right? Very kind of old thinking. They're currently in the process of a lot of people that have been in the business for many years. The old thinkers are kind of starting to retire and move out. New thinking is getting into the business, but they're still kind of in that process of changing of the guard. So at the conference, you see a lot of companies selling these new kind of end-to-end solutions where they have the data from the IoT and more digital solutions. And you're not seeing a lot of adoption of them yet, but they're starting to market them more because they know that up and coming executives in the business are interested in that, but the changing of the guard hasn't quite happened yet. So they're anticipating that happening. So they're pushing it more, but it's still not fully been adopted yet. So what was interesting about the conference is everybody was there except the big oil companies. There was no Exxon, there was no BP,
Interesting.
Nobody like that. Just their tier, all their providers were there.
Was there any nod to sustainability or synthetic fuels or the future or anything like that?
Lots of nods to sustainability and a lot of nods to sustainability from the Middle East.
Yeah.
What is the name of the Aramco?
Yeah, biggest listed company next to Apple, I think.
They were there. I stumbled across them and had talked to them for about an hour before I realized who they were. I have that problem. I do that with celebrities a lot too, by the way.
They had one of celebrities every day and have that problem.
And don't realize who they are until somebody tells you afterwards. So that actually happened to me. I was at the Aramco booth. They had a really, as you can imagine, gigantic booth.
Yeah.
And a very nice setup with interactive kiosks, which what drew me in because they were very open about what they were doing. And I was like, oh, this is great. they talk a lot about what they're doing with sustainability and robots and drones and technology. And I was interested in it. So I went up and I was looking at their kiosk, and one of their reps came up and started a conversation and realized that I was kind of a technical person, and told him I worked in innovation. And he and I ended up talking for like an hour. They gave me a bunch of stuff. Like I got a hat, of course.
Nice.
And we ended up having a great conversation. And he's like, you should come back. We should talk more. And then I had to leave and go meet somebody. And then later, the person that I went and met who works in the business, we came back by the booth. Right across from the booth was Baker Hughes, which is a huge kind of consulting company.
I've heard the name.
Yeah. And we were at that booth, and I was like, oh, I was at that booth, Aramco, earlier. They were great people. I was talking, he's like, yeah, do you not know who they are? And I'm like, no. And then he told me, and I'm like, oh. And he's like, yeah, they're huge. They're absolutely ginormous. Like you said, one of the largest companies, like next to Apple. I'm like, I had no idea. But they were wonderfully nice and super forthcoming. And
well, my wife's going to Saudi Arabia next week, so we might have to have her on next week just to get her impressions of what it's like, because it's changing a lot. Actually, I went to World Travel Market, which I think we discussed a couple of weeks back, which is a big conference here, and Saudi has got the entire the outside of the conference. Every billboard outside is a Saudi Arabia billboard. And when I say billboard, I mean they're like 7 stories high. Enormous building wraps. They're all Saudi. And then the whole Middle East hall, which is a big hall, most of that hall is Saudi Arabia, including Saudia Airlines and a whole bunch of their developments on the Red Sea and whatever. So they're spending a lot of cash.
My friend who was showing me around the conference and introducing me to people, he works for one of the big companies, was telling me that Aramco, much as you had mentioned on previous podcasts about the Saudis, no expense is too great.
Yeah, but it's worth it. What's the percentage that Saudi supplies of the world oil market? It's a chunk.
It is, but it's surprisingly small.
Okay.
But they have a huge oil reserve.
Yeah. I mean, I flew over it. I flew from Greece to Dubai last week, and the route that the plane takes is down over the Mediterranean Sea towards Egypt, and then it sort of turns over Tel Aviv, and then it flies for the next hour or so across Saudi towards the Gulf. Saudi is enormous. I literally fly over it for an hour and a bit, and you look down, and there's just desert, and there's no population down there at all. And imagine if only 25% of it has been geologically surveyed. There's probably still a ton of oil down there they haven't even found yet, let alone what they have.
That's right.
Have got.
Well, I learned, like, I got a master's degree in oil and gas in 3 days from these people. It was wonderful. It was fascinating. But here's what I learned about Saudi is currently what they produce is, I don't want to overstate, minuscule compared to like even the United States, right? But they do have an oil reserve that rivals any other country, right? They have a huge amount of oil in reserve. But the quality of the oil that comes out of the ground in Saudi Arabia is the best in the world. Like they're like literally what comes out of the ground, you could put it in a car without refining. And that's what makes their oil the best.
Okay.
Right. Like what comes out of the ground here in the United States has to be refined. It's like junk, essentially.
Right.
And refining it is extremely expensive, apparently. Right.
Okay.
And like they're like what comes out of the ground in Saudi Arabia, like literally it's clear. It's supposed to be like the best in the world. And that's why the oil in the Middle East is so valuable. The other thing I learned is that the oil industry has the highest rate of death by a factor of 30 of any other business.
Wow.
In the United States, but nobody talks about it, of course.
Wow.
Yeah. I did not know that either, but it's the way that the oil companies structure their contracts with their vendors so that they indemnify themselves. Yeah.
I mean, I knew that people who worked on rigs got super danger money, but I didn't know that they actually died. I mean, I assumed there were deaths from accidents and.
Well, and it's just even like they were talking. The person I was talking to is a trainer that works for a company that provides training and safety training to people for a third party that does it for the companies that like builds ships, like offshore drilling rigs, right? And he's like, even these shipbuilders that are based in the United States, they like will lose 30 people a year on one ship building one ship that you never hear about. But the way that the contracts are structured is like the oil company will hire shipbuilder X, and the contract stipulates that the shipbuilder will follow all of the safety precautions, and then they hire the shipbuilder, even though they know the shipbuilder isn't going to follow the safety precautions.
Why would anyone go and work for a company where they know people are dying?
Money. And I've heard this, my wife, who's from Louisiana, a lot of people from where she's from, most people work in the oil fields, in the oil business. So I was talking to my wife about it when I got back. It's not uncommon to see a lot of like kids, 18, 19-year-old kids that go off and work in the oil fields, come back and they're driving a $70,000, $80,000 car, but they live with their parents in a trailer, right? Because they make all this money.
Yeah, that happens in the mines in Australia as well,
Right.
Live in Bali and fly in and do a 4-week shift and fly out to Bali, live in Bali for another 3 weeks.
That's exactly right. They work them very hard and in very dangerous conditions, but they pay them so much money. Where else, if you live in, like as an example, if you live in central Louisiana, where the primary economic source is farming, where else are you going to make that kind of money?
Yeah,
where you could potentially make $100,000 a year when you're like 18,
and maybe even the family's paid off.
That's exactly what they do. They just pay them off. But as the person I was talking to, who's actually a young guy, he's younger than I am, who told me, and he's like, it's horrible. It's a very not to be pejorative, it's like in many ways a dirty business. The truth of it is that, as dirty of a business it is, it's a necessary business. The world runs on energy.
Yeah. And
nobody wants to talk about it. But like the fact of the matter is we love to talk about alternative fuels and everything. But he's like, we can't, the world can't, if we stop producing oil tomorrow, everything would stop. And he's right. It's like you can't live without oil and gas. Right now, you can't.
Well, even if you move to biodiesel or whatever else, then you're using enough sugarcane fields to fertile land to feed several
right. That's right.
100,000 people. So
right. That was his point.
Yeah.
He's like, if you use wind, that's not sustainable. If you use solar, it's not sustainable.
I think wind has been proven to be, and solar definitely is. Solar has become, because I was talking to someone here about solar the other day, and they were saying, there's a new plant going out in the back of the UAE, which I think is 4.5 gigawatt solar plant, which is 3 nuclear power stations.
Right. Well, he's saying is like you can't. It's not globally sustainable 24. Like you'd have to have multiple sources of that type of energy to be able to provide what like oil or gas provides currently globally.
I mean, I think for something like cars, it would be a problem, and trucks, heavy trucks and things like that. But,
right.
I saw a thing last week, which basically they've made solar panels completely clear. So you could basically, every window that exists on Earth could be a solar panel.
Yeah, that's kind of my contention is that, and I've said this for years, I always like hold up my phone and I say, we have more power in our hand today than we used to get us to the moon. Why in 2022 have we not been able to solve or come up with a better alternative to the combustion engine? We just haven't been incentivized, or we have been discouraged from doing so.
And I saw a really interesting presentation today. It was an architectural firm who was sort of showing some mock-ups of future buildings, and they were sort of built in a way that the windmill was effectively the internal structure of the building, and the building was built around this 100-story windmill. And
that's actually really cool.
And then the wind didn't matter which way the wind came in, it would still turn, but it would power the building completely, and the building would be completely self-sufficient and wind powered, and it wouldn't fall over. And there was a whole bunch. It was a really interesting presentation about what could be done. I might dig it out, spend some more time on it. But yeah, it's always interesting going to these sort of conferences, especially if you don't know the industry, and you kind of see some of the things that you totally expected and some of the things that you go, oh, never knew that.
Right. Well, and it's great to learn about a business that you don't know about, because I think that's fascinating. And then completely on a personal level, it was cool to walk around. Like I said, there was countries represented, so like the Netherlands and Norway and Japan and Brazil, but mostly like the Norwegian, like Norway and the Netherlands. There's a lot of companies there from like shipbuilders. So it was really cool to go talk to like shipbuilding architects.
Yeah.
And like look at the work and the technology that goes to that, just from a personal level. I thought that was cool.
It's called offshore, but it had other things like fracking and other.
Oh yeah, there was all kind of stuff there. It was onshore, offshore, deep sea, anything to do with any kind of drilling.
Isn't there a Discovery series like about the guys who do fracking in Alaska or something, or is that gold? Can't remember.
That was gold. There was a show about fracking at one time, but then they of course they quietly pulled that off the air, because fracking is not a fun thing to talk about here anymore, because so many people have gotten sick and died from it. I always have to bring this up every once in a while just to remind everybody where we came from. There also was a show at one time on MTV called Bum Fights.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
No, I do not.
Where they actually had homeless people fight each other, and it was on a national cable TV network.
That sounds terrific.
So we've evolved.
I was just thinking, I thought you were about to talk about the Beverly Hillbillies. We were talking about oil and Texas tea. The first thing that came to my mind was a theme song from the Beverly Hillbillies. Right. So let's pause this one, get back in, and then I'll talk about my trip to Dubai.
Yes, let's do that.
All right. See you in a bit. Thanks for listening. Get the latest episodes by subscribing via your favorite podcast app. We are on Apple, Google, Spotify, Audible, and a bunch more. New episodes drop on Sundays. Also check out our YouTube channel for outtakes and bonus content.
And we're back.
I've left Greece for the first time in 2 years.
How's it feel?
A bit weird, a bit disorientating, and yet almost like nothing ever changed. It's very, very strange.
Is this the first flight you've taken in 2 years?
First flight, first anything, really, for a couple of... Well, August 2020 was when I went from the UAE to Greece, and I've been in Greece ever since. Emirates almost got it right. I flew Emirates, and Emirates, to be fair, Emirates during the pandemic, unlike some Australian airlines, basically have kept my status. So I still have the same frequent flyer status as I had before the pandemic. And all of my points are still there. So they haven't expired any of my points. It was an uneventful flight. It's only 5 hours or so from Greece to Dubai. But just as you land, touchdown, wheels down, taxiing along the runway, they kind of put up this CX survey, customer satisfaction survey on the touch screen.
Interesting.
On the back of the seats. And it's like, how was your meal? How was the crew? How was the flight overall? Blah, blah, blah. And it's just happy faces, sad faces. So you kind of click your happy face or sad face, depending on what for each one of these things. So I'm like, yeah, that was all right. Went down the list, all kind of happy faces. And then they parked the plane on a stand so far away from the terminal, it might as well have been the next Emirate. I mean, it was almost parked. It was almost parked in Sharjah, which is the neighboring Emirate to Dubai. And then after having a very COVID-friendly flight, masks worn if you want to wear your masks, everything kind of, sanitized.
Right.
They park the plane at the other side of the airport and then stick everyone on a bus to take you back to the terminal for 15 minutes. no open windows, just a sardine can full of people after a flight.
What the heck?
I'm glad they gave me the survey before I got on the bus, because otherwise their rating would have been very different. Apart from that, it was uneventful.
That's hilarious, though.
Yeah.
Come on, that's pretty funny.
For some reason, they always do that on the Greece flight. I think the big long haul flights, if you're going to Australia or London, they get the A380s and they park next to the terminal. They get the sort of the ramps and everything. But the Greece flights, for some reason, get parked on the other side of the airport. I don't know why.
Do the Greeks smell funny or?
Well, the weird thing is that flight's actually come from Newark. That flight goes Newark, Athens, Dubai. If you hadn't got off in Greece and you'd gone direct from Newark to Dubai and you got stuck on a bus at the end of it, you'd be a little bit annoyed. But anyway.
So you got off the plane. Then what?
Got off a plane, picked up a driver who we used to work with a lot in Dubai. It's one of those things, if you live in Dubai, and it's going to sound very Dubai, it's one of those things in Dubai that if you have a good driver that you trust, it's a good thing. The thing I did like is that there's a company here called Careem, and Careem was the UAE Me Too version of Uber. It was a ride-sharing app, not exactly the same as Uber, because every single car in the Careem fleet was a Lexus. And if it wasn't a Lexus, it was a Tesla. So it was kind of a high-end Uber. So imagine Uber Black, but that was Careem. It's a good app. It looked exactly the same as Uber, worked exactly the same as Uber. And then Uber bought it a few years back and made quite a lot of money. And the great thing about Careem, which was really cool, is they shared a lot of the money with the drivers.
That is a nice idea.
I'm pretty sure Uber wouldn't have done it if it was the other way around.
Hell no. Are you kidding? They would have never have done that.
So Careem have sort of turned themselves into a bit of a super app. It used to just be a ride-sharing app, and now you can order your groceries, you can have a wallet, you can do various bits and pieces around Dubai using a single app without having to go in and out of different apps. You can have a single app. But the cool thing was that the local mobile phone network here called Do, I tried to top up my phone with credit and it wouldn't let me because it doesn't accept foreign cards. But Careem, I can top up my Do phone via the Careem app with a foreign card, but I can't do it via the network's own app. So thanks to Careem, I managed to top up my phone. And then I went to then I went sailing for 2 days because Airbus was sponsoring a regatta at the Dubai Offshore Sailing Club. So that was good. And we actually did well. We came second overall on the weekend.
Nice.
That was good fun.
Congrats.
Did some racing, did okay. Then Monday, I went to World Travel Market. Fewer exhibitors than pre-COVID. So normally there's at least 3 massive halls at the Dubai World Trade Center, which is a really big exhibition space. It's similar to what you were saying. Most of the countries who are interested have big stands. So, there'll be a stand which takes up half the hall, and on that stand, Greece will have 3 stands within the stand, and Spain will have 3 stands within a stand. It's big business. And then because Dubai is a conference destination, there's a lot of big conferences here. Gulf Health, World Travel Market, one called GITEX, which is the big tech one. Every single week, there's a massive 20,000 person event in the World Trade Center. And so all of the hotels are competing for the delegates of those conferences. And then there's the travel tech section, which this year I didn't have time to really explore, but that's all the big tech, whether that's the booking engines, Amadeus, aggregators, hotel aggregators, flight aggregators, all sorts of really interesting travel tech. And,
was this the reason that you went for this conference?
No.
It just happened. You just happened to be in town.
I just happened to be in town for World Travel Market. And I've always been, because I've been in the travel business on and off for nearly 20 years. The first website I ever built for myself, the first startup I ever did for myself was a website called Itchy Feet, which was a travel blog. And that was in 2000. 22 years ago, I started a travel blog. Big spend by Saudi, like I said. Very. Oh, and I got my first ever Twitter personalized ad.
Really?
Yes. And I think it's because of a company here called MeMob, who I know, a really interesting company. They're basically one of these companies that puts, for want of a better word, spyware on your apps and then allows advertisers to use that information to target you with an ad. So just after I left the World Travel Market at Dubai World Trade Center, in my Twitter feed, I received an ad for Saudia, the airline, with a video of their stand at World Travel Market.
What?
What I think is they've done is that MeMob allows you to geofence. You can geofence an area. You can pick out of their platform anyone who has visited a certain area, and you can target those people with ads based on geofencing. So I'm pretty sure what Saudia have done is they've gone to MeMob and said, we want to target our World Travel Market ad to anyone who was in the Dubai World Trade Center in the last 3 days. It's pretty cool.
Interesting.
First relevant personalized ad I've ever received on Twitter, which I think makes Dubai or Saudi now more advanced than most Western markets when it comes to Twitter advertising.
Why can't we have better personalization?
Yeah, well, we can. You just got to accept that there's a company taking your GPS data off your phone without you necessarily knowing it and selling it to a Saudi airline.
I attend these bi-monthly things here in town called The Future Of, which I'm sure you've seen me post about.
Yeah.
And I actually brought this conversation, just to kind of add to it. Why can't we have better personalization? Does it bother you? And, the general consensus among people, and not even people that work in the marketing industry, is no, it doesn't bother them. They wish they could have that.
You get those weird situations where you talk about something and you get an ad, and I still don't know how they do that.
Right.
And maybe it's just coincidence, but it seems a bit more than coincidence, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And this is a B2B ad. So this is advertising. This isn't advertising tickets on Saudia. This is advertising their stand at World Travel Market. If you were to send that ad to everyone in Dubai, that would be a significant waste of money. But if you could target anyone who'd walked into the Dubai World Trade Center in the last 24 hours, then that would be a very useful use of money.
Right.
Anyway.
And how often have you seen personalization on Twitter?
I don't. And actually, I've
never seen it.
When I normally click the little box at the side that says, why am I seeing this ad? I get a response that says, the advertiser wanted to get everyone who is in this market. That's just bad marketeers. That's not the problem of technology. That's just lazy marketeers. One of the reasons I was here on purpose was for what I was here today. I was here for the Dubai Future Innovation Forum. It's a strange conference. It's based on 3 subjects. It's based on space, sustainability, and the metaverse.
Okay.
Yeah, really random group of subjects. From what I can tell, space is very important to the UAE. They have a space agency. They've got a 100-year plan. They've got astronauts in the space station. They've got a mission to Mars. They've got a mission to the moon. They're spending a lot of money on space, the UAE, doing some really interesting stuff. Yeah. And
I did not know that.
Yeah. It's one of their things in their long-term 100-year plan. Sustainability, I guess maybe they have to talk about it, but it didn't seem like it was getting as much attention today as it probably should have. And then the metaverse, I was meant to go to the metaverse sessions today, but they were running 2 hours late and I couldn't stay. I was there from 8 o'clock in the morning and the metaverse sessions didn't start till 6 in the afternoon. So
and you're like, nope.
I skipped those and there's 3 more tomorrow. So hopefully I'll get to see some metaverse sessions tomorrow. I learned something, which I think you'll enjoy. I think you'll enjoy this.
Tell me.
It'll fit right into your wheelhouse. So today, do you know what digital twins are?
Of course.
Right. So you have a digital environment, you have a physical environment, you replicate that in a metaverse style space, and then you inhabit that in a virtual reality and you kind of do stuff, right? and you can have a virtual
Right.
twin of yourself as well in the metaverse. So today I was listening to a very smart man from Malta talking about digital triplets. Have you heard of digital triplets?
No, I have not.
Right. So digital triplets are really interesting. So digital twins, you've got a digitized version, basically a clone of the physical space. And then you've got a
Right.
clone of the human being within that space or system. It could be a space or it could be a system. And then you have the human being cloned or twinned in that space. So digital triplet is really interesting. What a digital triplet is an AI version, sandbox version of the space or system. And what that does is allows the AI to vary certain parameters within the digital twin to test for optimization. Not a twin of the system or the space. It's an AI generated alternative to the system or space that the person then has to interact with.
Interesting.
So from an experience point of view, I know we've been talking a lot about experience and reality and transformation using some of these new technologies. It's a fascinating methodology to kind of bring in AI into the experience design process, which one I hadn't heard of before, but seems to be gathering some speed. And like I say, touches on some of your favorite subjects like data and AI and VR and everything else. He was also talking about things like using VR for pain relief. So the way they do that is via distraction therapy. Basically, they put on a headset onto somebody's head, and then they give them an incredibly engaging VR experience. So it's like a roller coaster, but then there's random animals that appear, and then there's music and there's stuff, and it's basically to keep the brain so busy and whatever that you basically forget about the pain that you're experiencing because your brain is being tricked into looking everywhere and being forced to engage
and not paying attention to the pain. Essentially,
forget about the pain. So apparently, this study was done in the University of Washington without VR, and it had good results. But when they did it in the VR environment, it had like a 25% better result than the non-VR version of the experiment.
That's fascinating.
There's some really interesting stuff going on in that space, which again, as we've talked about, is it's not the crypto fanboy stuff. It's like real world applications of the technology, the metaverse style technology.
In the US, particularly when you go to tech conferences, here in Atlanta, we have a very thriving kind of startup scene. Startups here are very focused on a particular type of business, right? As opposed to like what you see in Silicon Valley, like stuff like Facebook and Snapchat and these kind of aspirational businesses can thrive in Silicon Valley. That stuff those kind of startups would never make here. By and large, you go to tech conferences here, technologies like that don't get a lot of airplay in the US because that's not what the kind of sensibilities of the US market lean toward because of how, like as an example, how our healthcare system works. So
you're looking at more like you're looking at e-commerce and last mile delivery and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So it's super interesting to me that you go like this, like it'd be great to like you get a chance to go to this conference in the UAE, where their technology folks are from all over the world, and they're thinking in completely different directions than they are here in the US. It's fascinating.
Yeah. It's funny because I was sitting on a table with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce from Washington.
Really?
A guy from Malta, a university in Malta, presenting at a conference in the UAE and presenting to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce from Washington.
Right?
I mean,
that's hilarious.
It's a pretty interesting mix. It's a melting pot, that's for sure. The only metaverse thing that was today just scared me silly, to be honest. It's a company called Huri.com. And
okay.
So basically, it's a metaverse of copies of ourselves. So talking about digital twins, it's basically digital twins Well, it started well. Now, bear with me, okay? I'm gonna lay it out and see which part. Tell me when you think it starts to sound a bit strange. The first thing is it's AI-powered assistants that will do menial tasks online or in the metaverse.
Okay.
That sounds okay, right?
Yeah.
If it copies your behavior and it knows that you want to go, let's say I don't want to wait on the end of a live chat for someone to answer, but I can have a digital assistant that will wait on that live chat for me. And then when that live chat engages, it can deal with the first 3 lines of the conversation, and then it can tell me that it's in the chat, and I can dive in. So at that point I can kind of say, yeah, that sort of makes sense.
Okay.
Right. So then
that doesn't sound too bad.
That sounds all right. So then your AI-powered twin of yourself will interact on your behalf in social networks.
All right, now it's starting to sound weird.
It's starting to sound like hell.
Yeah.
Can you imagine my bot twin talking to my mum on my behalf? Why would anyone?
Yeah, that's weird.
Why would anyone want to do that? I'm just thinking Terminator at that point. Like, what if my digital twin decides that it wants to take over my life and run my life for me? I mean,
well, what were they describing as the practical applications of that?
So the original bit was this digital assistant, which going back to our episode on the digital dogs, I can understand that, right? A helper in the metaverse, or a companion in the metaverse, or an assistant in the metaverse. I can understand a sort of a servant, if you want, for want of a better word, who does menial stuff for me in the metaverse. Maybe the way they design it is that I've got to schlep all the way over to the virtual bank because they've built a teller in a virtual bank in the metaverse. And I don't want to walk to the bloody ATM because that's a useless task for me. But maybe my virtual twin knows my password and can wander off to the bank for me and do whatever I need it to do, because I don't want to do that. But then you just get into weirdness, because a virtual banker is talking to my virtual twin. And
that's bizarre.
That just sounds like a complete waste of bandwidth to me. And then I couldn't get my head around who owns the bot, who owns the IP of the twin, what's the data privacy around that? I mean, there's so many questions I've got around that. It's just a bit creepy. So that was that. Anyway, you went to the movies last week.
Yes, I went twice.
I know. Cory, I've got it here on my notes. Cory's been to the movies. No spoilers.
All right, real quick. So the first one I want to say, because it was just so good and I want to have a minute to talk about it, is I went and saw Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think that's the name of it. And it was so good. I can't even tell you how good it was.
Is this the magic one? Is this kind of the one that no one can describe, that's kind of a magic trick turned into a movie?
So it's a multiverse movie.
Okay.
And it's got Ki Hai Kwan in it. I don't know if you know who that is. He was the child actor. He short round in the Indiana Jones movies, and he was also the Asian child actor that was in the Goonies.
Right.
And
I do remember him.
He left acting.
He must be 40 by now.
He's old. Yeah, he's like 50. And he left acting and he came back. This is the first movie he's done like 30 years. And he's going to win an Oscar. It is so good. This movie is so original and so fantastic. And the story's great. It's an all Asian cast, which it doesn't really matter, but it's unique in that way. The acting is spectacular. The story is spectacular. It's got like amazing fight scenes in it. It's got amazing heart. It's like it'll make you cry. It's hilarious. It's probably the best movie I've seen in at least 5 years. Like I'm going to go see it again. It was that good.
Okay.
And it completely caught me off guard because I had heard it was good. And then I went and saw it and it was so good. I was like in the movie theater. I was like, I can't believe it's this good. Like, I need to see this again. I wasn't expecting it to be this good.
Is this the one that,
I'm gonna leave it there.
Stephen Colbert was talking about during the pandemic that was based on a magic trick that no one could even describe what it was about? Was that something else?
I don't know about that. You know what? I can't even describe it, but I'll tell you this.
Because most people, the one that he was talking about during the pandemic, everyone was saying, "Oh, you've got to go and see it," but I can't talk about it because if I talk about it, I'll give it away. Maybe it was a different film.
Here's all I can tell you. The premise is it's a husband and wife, Asian couple that own a laundromat, and they're trying to do their taxes, and that's it.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you. And
is this the one? Oh, this is the one that's got the other female action star in it as well.
Yes.
And she plays
the one that was in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
It's her metaverse, right? It's all versions of her life.
Yes.
And she's different characters. Okay, I heard about that on some podcast I was listening to the other night. All right. Okay. Cool. So you saw
so good.
You saw two metaverse, you saw two multiverse films last week, then.
Yes, and then I saw Doctor Strange, which was also really good. And here's the thing about Doctor Strange that I completely forgot going into it. And in a way, I was very happy that I forgot. This movie is directed by Sam Raimi. For those of you who are not complete nerds like I am, Sam Raimi, who also, of course, directed all the original Spider-Man movie, who cares? He also is famous for directing all the Evil Dead movies with Bruce Campbell.
Okay.
If you've ever seen those.
I'm not into horror, but yeah.
Yeah, those are like horror/funny horror movies from the 80s. And they're hilarious. Anyway, so great movie. Also, like almost borderline a horror movie, which made it even more great. Okay. It was really good. You know what? I will tell you, you probably should have seen WandaVision on Disney Plus to get it because it is super heavily tied to that.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that it's required, but you should, because this movie is entirely about Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch. And it like picks up right at the end of WandaVision. If you have not seen the show on Disney Plus, WandaVision,
he must hate this. He did Xena Warrior Princess.
Yes.
He also did some of the remake of an Australian TV series called Rake, which is about a lawyer. But don't watch the American version. If you want to watch Rake, try and find the Australian version of Rake. It is so
I bet
good.
You can find it. He was great in Sherlock. If you've seen the Sherlock show with him,
who, Cumberbatch?
Yeah.
Yeah, but didn't he win the Oscar for the other one he's just done, the Western the dog one?
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
That's on Netflix as well. That's Jane Campion. That's a good film. And
have you seen it?
And he plays a very non-Cumberbatch character.
Yeah, I was like,
although Doctor Strange is a very non-Cumberbatch character, to be fair.
Go see Multiverse of Madness. It is good. It picks up right where WandaVision and frankly, the last Spider-Man movie, which with No Way Home, which if you also haven't seen it, that's a must-see. That's probably the best Marvel movie that's been made.
Next week, I'll be back in Athens. We need to go down the digital triplets rabbit hole.
Please do. Please find some more information. I'm super interested.
Yeah, cool. All right, man.
All right, man. Have a good time.
Cheers, buddy.
All right. Bye-bye.